Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, greetings and welcome indeed to a special session from Global Lecture Series, hosted by the Tokyo Metropolitan University and aided, of course, by the city of Tokyo. The theme today is the future prospects of post-COVID-19. We have 3 parts in total. In part 1, we will be welcoming, of course, the Governor Koike, and one of the world's most influential public intellectuals of today, Professor Harari. And in part 2 and in part 3, we'll also be welcoming teachers, academics, and students of Tokyo Metropolitan University to further our discussion with Professor Harari. So without further ado, let us begin. I'm sure, of course, all of you know the presence of Professor Harari of Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He needs no introduction, as we all know. His book, *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, has taken the world by storm, selling over 21 million copies. And that's not to mention Homo Deus and, of course, 21 lessons for the 21st century. And now, also with me, I'm equally exceptionally honored to introduce Governor Koike. She has been governing over this formidable city of 14 million people and tackled COVID-19 with its consequences and social implications right from the forefront. The governor was also instrumental in the massive success of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and Paralympic Games, games that no doubt will be remembered for its historical and valiant efforts. So let's begin. Oh, and a quick introduction of myself. I'm Harry Sugiyama. I work essentially in Japanese TV and in radio. I'm a son of a journalist who first came to Japan in 1964. That was when the first Olympics was held. But he was a writer. He was a written journalist. I'm more in TV and in radio, but so honored to have the company, of course, of the governor, but of Professor Harari too. Okay, so let us kick this off then. So the theme for today, the future prospects of COVID-19. May I ask your thoughts about, so let's start off with the governor then. Governor, can I ask you your thoughts about this topic too, but also the opportunity to talk with Professor Harari too?
Well, first of all, hello everyone, and I'm Koike Yuriko, Governor of Tokyo. And Professor Harari, I'm so honored to have this opportunity to speak with you. Talking about the COVID-19 pandemic first, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our world as never before. Who would have imagined that in this city of 14 million people, everyone would be going about their day wearing masks and trying to avoid physical contact with others? There was also a rapid spread of remote work, which had not been making much progress here in Japan, unfortunately. And there are now fewer packed trains, which used to be a symbol of the busy city of Tokyo. The future is definitely changing. And this should not be simply be a change, but a change to a better future. I believe so. That's the key point here. Last summer's Olympic and Paralympic Games, Tokyo 2020, were the first games ever to be held after 1-year delay. The title was 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games. It never changed, although it was held in 2021. And the 2020 Games ever to be held after 1-year delay, as I told you, and with no spectators. However, the Olympic and Paralympic Games combined yielded over 10,000 hours of broadcast content. The Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 generated about 28 billion video views, and more than 3 billion people worldwide watched the Games. And with the cooperation of people around the world, we were able to deliver a successful Games. by building upon the legacy of the games, I believe we can take Tokyo to its next stage as a sustainable city. And from amid the turmoil and chaos of today, we must act to seize the future. And I hope to discover hints on how to go about this through this talk with Professor Harari, the world-renowned scholar who foresees the future from the history of humanity's past. Thank you very much. It's my first message to the listeners and audience.
Thank you very much, Governor. Professor Harari, what are you looking forward to in today's conversation with the Governor? And how do you envisage the world post-COVID-19?
Well, I think that it's impossible to foresee the future because the future depends on the decisions we make, on the actions we take. There isn't a single deterministic future. If we look at the past 2 years and how we dealt with COVID, then on a global level, I think that it has been a tremendous scientific success coupled with political failure. Never before have humanity been so powerful in the face of an epidemic. You know, most big epidemics in the past, like the Black Death in the Middle Ages, or the big influenza epidemic of 1918, humanity was completely helpless in the face of them. People didn't understand what was happening, what could be done about it. We were helpless. With COVID, it took just 2 weeks to identify the virus, and within a couple of months, we knew how to slow down and delay the chains of infections. Within a year, we had vaccines, effective vaccines against it. It is an amazing scientific achievement. But on the political level, even though we saw many successes on a municipal and on a national level, some municipalities and countries have done really well. On a global level, it was really, I think, a miserable failure because there was no global cooperation on this, or a global plan of action of how to stop the spread of the epidemic when it was still possible to do it in the early stages, and how to manage it, both medically and economically, later on. We saw in many places, like in my own country of Israel, that governments were focused on, say, vaccinating their own populations without realizing that if you allow the virus to continue to spread in other parts of the world, like in developing nations, it won't help you so much if you vaccinate your own people, because there will be mutations, there will be new variants of the virus. We need a global response, and we didn't get the global response that we really needed. And I hope we learned the lesson, and that on other future crises, whether it's a new pandemic, whether it's climate change, whether it's disruptive technology, we'll see better global cooperation, and this is really on the politicians. Scientists give us the tools, but the decisions must always be made by politicians. I'm against letting scientists make policy decisions. They weren't elected by people. They don't represent the people. This is the job of politicians. So I hope that they'll be able to cooperate better next time. And one more thing that I would like to point out is that, again, the amazing success, technological success, of shifting so many things, like the Olympics, online. One of the biggest things that didn't happen in the last 2 years is that the internet didn't crash, which is amazing. We shifted so many activities overnight online, and it's an infrastructure. It wasn't built to deal with so much traffic, and it held, which is really amazing. The downside is that now the tech companies, the technology has so much power over us that this is a source of deep anxiety, that what will be done with all that power.
Thank you, Professor Harari. in talking about technology, I want to further discuss how technology is going to be lived with the future coming up. In your book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, there are fascinating thoughts on how we should live with technology, the good and the bad, regarding the consequences, and crucially, the role of AI and big data. I would first of all like to ask the governor on her views regarding digitalization, technology, also with Tokyo too. Thank you.
Well, Harry, thank you. And talking about the digitalization or IT, the pandemic has accelerated the trend for digitalization. Technologies such as 5G, AI, and big data are important tools for enriching them and making people's lives more convenient. And the quick implementation of these innovations is indispensable for Tokyo to continue to shine. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government as well is actively adopting such technologies, including conducting projects on self-driving buses and taxis and analyzing big data on people flow when an earthquake strikes. And these will also be used to raise the quality of government services. We call it the QoS, quality of service. In advancing the use of technologies, we must not forget the perspective of human resources development as well. In addition to fostering specialized skills, it would be crucial to develop individuals, to develop a broad range of individuals who know how to properly use these technologies. And if these innovations are only convenient to a limited number of people, society will not develop, as you wrote in your books, I remember. So I believe that the sustainable growth and development of the city will only come from everyone benefiting from technology.
Thank you. Professor Harari, the governor just talked about the importance of having a broad range of individuals who know how to use these technologies. Can you tell us how important this is and how we should embrace technology with its rapid advance in modern history?
Yeah, I completely agree with the governor that it's very important to share the knowledge and the power of the new technologies as broadly as possible. Otherwise, we are facing two very big dangers, which is the rise of digital dictatorships and the rise of data colonialism. Digital dictatorship means that, for the first time in human history, it's now possible to follow everybody all the time and to get to know you better than you know yourself. Now, dictators throughout history always dreamt about following everybody all the time and getting to know them better than they know themselves, but it was never possible because the tools weren't there. The KGB, even in Soviet Russia, couldn't really follow each and every Soviet citizen 24 hours a day. It was impossible. Now it's possible. For the first time in history, it is possible to create this total surveillance regime. And if we allow this to happen, the result will be the worst totalitarian systems in human history, far worse than the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany. The other big danger, this is the danger on the kind of national level. The other big danger is of data colonialism, a new kind of colonialism, in which all the data of the world is harvested by just a couple of advanced countries which lead in the industries of AI and data collection and data analysis. And this can result in a new kind of a colonial situation. Just imagine that 20 years from now, somebody in another country, in the US, in China, I don't know, has the entire personal data of every politician, every journalist, every judge, every military officer, their entire medical records, every sexual encounter they ever had, every joke they ever told. It will no longer be an independent country. It will be a data colony. You know, in the 21st, previously in history, to control a country, you needed to send in the soldiers and the tanks. In the 21st century, to control a country, you mainly need to take out the data. That's enough. So how do we make sure that we don't have this huge imbalance, not just on the national level, but also on the international level, that we don't have just a few countries kind of controlling the flow of data of the whole world and these powerful technologies of AI.
Thank you. In talking of life post-COVID-19, we talked about the important elements of technology, but I also want to talk with both of you about environment too. Professor Harari, you talk of climate change as being one of the biggest challenges humanity faces right now, and that global cooperation, this is so crucial in finding a solution. Governor Koike, is this how you feel too?
Well, what Dr. Harari said about rising data dictatorism and data colonialism, that's very fearful. And what I wonder how we can manage it. We cannot manage climate change, and as a matter of fact, for your information, I'm a former minister of the environment, and we started to study about the climate security. What happened in Tonga? What's happening in the Arctic? It's a security matter. Now, talking about the climate change, recently we have been seeing many extreme weather events, such as heat waves and heavy rain occurring around the globe. And we have absolutely no time to lose. And this is especially true for cities. Well, as I mentioned, Tokyo has 14 million population. And since we consume huge amounts of energy, we play a very important role in protecting our planet's environment. In order to achieve zero emissions by 2050, the Tokyo Metropolitan Government is aiming for carbon half, a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So near. And emissions from office buildings, homes, and other buildings account for about 70% of Tokyo's carbon emissions. We are now looking into strengthening and upgrading current ordinances and systems, including the Tokyo Cap and Trade Program, and which we were the first city in the world to introduce this program, and it's very successful. And we are examining a scheme that will make it mandatory for all newly built houses to install solar energy systems. And we are also accelerating other efforts, such as stimulating green finance, centering on green bonds. And of course, the climate crisis is a global challenge that cannot be solved by Tokyo alone. And the powerful actions and cooperations and collaborative efforts of various actors are crucial here. So if states are bound by their national interests, the role of cities takes on even greater importance. In partnership with the other members of the C4 Cities, a Cities Climate Leadership Group, Tokyo is calling for accelerating actions to address the increasingly serious climate crisis. And our slogan is Time to Act. And last October, we organized the Time to Act Climate Action Forum attended by the world's key cities and leaders from various sectors. We inform the world about the pioneering initiatives taken by cities and private businesses, including sustainable buildings and the use of hydrogen technology. And we would demonstrate leadership in this decarbonization efforts while cooperating with the other cities of the world, companies, NGOs, and other stakeholders. This is what we are doing right now.
Thank you, Governor. Professor Harari, you just heard of the governor's efforts. Can you reiterate and accentuate how important it is for us to globally cooperate in order to preserve the environment, but also to preserve ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, as the governor said, I mean, this is a problem that affects all humans on Earth, all organisms on Earth, of course, and it cannot be solved by any single country, by any single city. It's very inspiring to hear that cities around the world are not waiting for national governments to take action. They are acting on the municipal level. And, you know, if one city discovers a good policy, then so many other cities around the world can learn from this example. What I would like to emphasize is that, you know, too many people over the last few years have jumped from denial to despair, from underestimating the danger of climate change to feeling that it's too late, we can't stop it now. And, you know, the best estimates we have for what's the price tag of stopping catastrophic climate change, as far as I could tell from reading various reports, it's just 2% of global annual GDP. To increase our investments in the right places in just 2% of global annual GDP. Now, this is extremely good news because even though it's a lot of money, it means that it's a completely feasible political project. Politicians are actually quite good at shifting 2% of resources from here to there. The world spends more than 2% of global GDP on military, on armies, on weapons every year. We spend enormous amounts on things like subsidies for fossil fuel industries. There are enormous resources going to waste. So the main message is that it's a feasible political project. It's not, some people think that, you know, you need to completely destroy modern civilization, to go back living in caves, to completely give up the modern economy. No. We can, with the resources we have, with the kind of political system, with the kind of economy we have, if we just get our priorities right and shift investments at, you know, at a moderate level of just 2% to the right places, this should be enough to prevent a catastrophic climate change.
Thank you very much, Professor Harari. We're unfortunately running out of time. There is so much to consider, so much to discuss, so much to implement, and hopefully the politicians out there will be hearing our words in close course. We will continue, Professor Harari, with our discussion after this with the teachers and students. But for now, I would like to ask the Governor for some words to our youths who will be designing the eventual future of Tokyo. So, Governor, if you please.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
I believe that it's our responsibility to the future to overcome crises such as the pandemic and climate change and make Tokyo a city where everyone can forever live happily with a sense of security. And remember that in any age, it is people who forge the future, and you students will be the principal actors of the future Tokyo. So Tokyo's society and economy were greatly affected by the virus, and I'm sure that you will all experience difficulties as well. What's important comes next. We must not just return to life before COVID, but use the experience gained from the pandemic to grow to further heights. And also, let's study more about the history. And one famous message that the that the fools learn through experiences, but the wisest learn through history. So let's realize a sustainable recovery, and to that end, as well, I hope you will continue to maintain a positive attitude and actively take up all kinds of challenges and keep up the good work. And thank you very much, Dr. Harari. I should be back to the meetings to fight against COVID-19. Please, thank you very much. It's so nice of you to exchange views, and I hope to see you soon in Jerusalem or in Jerusalem, or you are.
Or in Tokyo. Yeah.
Tokyo.
Yes.
Hopefully. Excellent.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Governor. Best of luck with your meetings. Keep on fighting. And thank you very much to Professor Harari too then. Discussions will follow with our teachers in due course.
Thank you very much.
さて、ただいまより都が設置する唯一の総合大学である東京都立大学の先生方および学生の皆様に入っていただき、持続可能な未来に向けて我々どうあるべきなのか大いに議論していきたいと思います。まずは都立大についてですが、9000人の学生を抱え、東京都や東京の人々とのつながりを大事にするとともに、幅広い分野の基礎から応用までの研究を進めて、人類の知を発展させることを重要な使命としています。都立大のシンボルマーク、大学の頭文字 T と上向きの矢印を表現し、自発の心が未来を開く、これをコンセプトとしています。そしてこちらの都立大から先生方お二方をお迎えしています。まずはですね、じゃあ拓磨さんから自己紹介の方をお願いしたいと思います。
はい、東京都立大学法学部で国際政治学を教えております拓磨佳代と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。
どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。続いて大貫先生。
東京都立大学人文社会学部で歴史学を教えております大貫俊夫です。よろしくお願いします。
はい、よろしくお願いいたします。お二方ともにですね、パンデミックをめぐる世界各国の対応についていろいろと積極的にメディアを通してご発信されていると思いますけれども、このトークセッションご案内の通りタイトルがポストコロナの未来予想図ということですけれども、先生方それぞれにポストコロナ後の世界、持続可能な未来、そしてグローバルな連携などの点から、現在のですね、課題のこの認識をいろいろと伺っていければ嬉しいです。ではまずは拓磨教授からお願いできますでしょうか。
Thank you for your introduction. Nice to meet you, Professor Harari. I'm Kayo Takuma from I'm Kayo Takuma from Tokyo Metropolitan University. I'm a big fan of your books, and when I heard of this event for the first time, when I heard this event, I got so excited, and I had no choice but to participate in this event. And I actually appreciate it. I actually appreciate this opportunity, and thank you for taking your time out of your very busy schedule. I'm teaching international relations at my university, as well as researching the global health governance, with a special focus on its interaction with the changing international environment. And with such background, today I would like to share my ideas on global response to the COVID-19. I have researched the history of international health cooperation, and based on such my research, I view the lack of global response as the most remarkable feature of the response to the COVID-19. We human beings, we human society have cooperated with each other to cope with the various viruses such as cholera, typhus, or Ebola, even amid the political tensions. For example, European countries have cooperated to establish the international sanitary regulation at the beginning of 20th century, just before the First World War, and the US and USSR have also collaborated to develop the polio vaccine or to eradicate the smallpox. And in contrast to such precedent, the response to the COVID-19 has been characterized by the lack of international solidarity. I do not mean that there is no international cooperation at all, but I mean that the international cooperation that has occurred is not sufficient to cope with the virus effectively. You know that as has been reported that there is a huge vaccine access gap between developed and developing countries. And South Africa willingly publicized the emergence of Omicron variant, which was just treated coldly by international society with a strict travel ban. I worry that the combination of such cases will be disincentive to share information internationally, and ultimately, hinder the international cooperation itself. And there are various factors that explain the lack of such international cooperation. Unlike the recent outbreaks such as the SARS or Ebola, the COVID-19 affects the world, although was a world simultaneously. So each country is busy with, coping with domestic, each country is very busy with its own domestic response, and they cannot afford to engage in international cooperation. And international political factors such as lack of leadership or the U.S.-China confrontation also contribute to the lack of such, the lack of international cooperation. And based on such perception, my question is that how to end the pandemic and how to prevent the next pandemic in this difficult international environment. The biggest lesson from this pandemic is that without international cooperation, it takes longer to end the pandemic. Actually, the COVID-19 pandemic is the longest pandemic to occur since 2000. And unfortunately, factors that suppose the lack of international cooperation, such as U.S.-China confrontation or the rise of populism, will continue to have an impact on our international society. So I cannot but be pessimistic about the future of international society. So and such lack of cooperation is also true for our response to other global issues such as climate change or nuclear control. So I would appreciate if you could share your thoughts on this point. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for this. I completely agree with your analysis. For me too, it was a huge disappointment to see the lack of global leadership and the lack of global cooperation over the last 2 years. In the beginning, it was like watching a disaster in slow motion, that as the virus began to spread around the world, and it was still in the initial stages, decisive action could have stopped it. And there was like, there are no adults in the room. Like everybody is just watching it, and nobody is taking a leadership of, okay, let's have an international front to together help the countries most in need and stop this before it spreads everywhere and before we have this problem that we are now facing with the mutations and the new variants. And there was no global leadership. And what was really disappointing about it is that, the virus is a much more obvious and immediate threat than other global problems like climate change. And it should have been relatively easy to unite humanity in the face of such a threat, and it just didn't happen. And this is really, and what's the answer? I don't know. This is where we need to rely on politicians to do their job, because the scientists did their job in a wonderful way to understand the virus, to develop treatments, to develop vaccines. But how to implement, how to use these tools, this is the job of the politicians, and it wasn't done really. And ideally, the response to COVID should be the establishment of a global healthcare system, a basic healthcare system for the entire human race. You know, lots of people, you mentioned populist leaders, they are very much in favor now of building walls and building fences on the borders. We need a wall on the border, but not between countries. We need a wall on the border between humanity and the viruses. If a virus anywhere in the world breaches this border and infects a person in South Africa or in Indonesia or in Brazil, anywhere, this places everybody in danger. So it's a kind of straightforward, simple idea that we need to provide first basic good health care for every person on earth, because everybody will benefit from that. And secondly, we need an effective global early warning system, which means sharing data more quickly and more openly. And for the first time in history, we have the technology to do it. It's now very easy. If you discover a new virus in China or in South Africa or in some remote town, within seconds, you can alert the entire world to that. It's now very easy to do it, and it's not done. So we have this huge gap between our immense power as a species, bigger than ever before, and the kind of lack of political wisdom or political motivation to use this power.
Yes, thank you. Political wisdom, political common sense, we are severely lacking in, I've got to say. Takuma-san, thank you for your words too. Professor Harari, thank you. Let's go on to our other sensei of the day today. 次にはですね、ハラリ教授と同じ歴史学を専門とされている大貫先生からいろいろと話を伺っていきたいと思います。お願いできますでしょうか。
大貫俊夫です。よろしくお願いします。私は中世ヨーロッパの歴史を専門にしておりまして、そのため今回ですねパンデミックが起きて、そのため14世紀の黒死病を真っ先に思い浮かべました。で、私自身はキリスト教の修道院に関心がありまして、その修道院が常に変わりゆく自然環境、社会環境にどう適応してどう危機を乗り越えて持続していったのかということをこれまで研究してきました。そのために、私は今回のパンデミックに直面し、黒死病について改めて14世紀の資料を読み、当時の中世の人たちがどのようにこの危機を乗り越えて、あるいはこの危機を認識していたのかということを勉強してきました。ですから、私はそうした歴史的なアプローチから、ハラリ先生にさまざまなお知恵をお聞きしたいというふうに考えております。日本でも中世の黒死病というのはものすごく人気のあるテーマでして、ですので、そこから新しいことが何か学べるのかなと思ってですね、私自身もさまざまに活動しているところです。で、ただ中世の歴史はいわゆる暗黒の時代というふうに言われているように、常にですね誤解されたり曲解されたり、そして都合のいいように利用されたりする時代です。ですので、私は黒死病のような出来事というのはもう一回限りの出来事ではないんだと、その時にパッと起こった悲劇ではないんだと、それよりももっと長いタイムスパンで考えなければいけない問題なんだということを常に強調してまいりました。本日私がですね引き合いに出したいのはイギリスの歴史家のブルース・キャンベルの提唱した大遷移という考え方です。で、この枠組みにおいて彼はそのペスト、14世紀半ばのペストの原因を述べるにあたってですね、1270年頃に起きた気候上の大変動、つまり小氷期に入ったということからそのペストの原因を述べています。このようにしてですね、より長いタイムスパンで考えないと今まさに起きていることというのは理解できないんだということなんだと考えます。で、さらにまた彼が社会生態系と呼んでいるこの右側の図のようにですね、社会生態系と呼んでいるこの図のように天候やエコシステムといった要素を議論に組み込まなければいけないということだと考えます。そのため先ほど都知事との対話の中でこの自然環境天候危機についてかなりその 危機感を持って語ってらしたのがすごく印象的で、私自身も強く、共鳴するところです。以上から、私はですね、今日のパンデミックを単純なその人間とウイルスの間の戦いだというふうなその二項対立的に考えるということはちょっと控えた方がいいのではないかと思います。つまり気候問題などそういう自然環境を全て加味したより大きな視点から広い視点から今回のパンデミックを捉えるべきではないかと。でさらに言えばパンデミックを契機にそういった自然環境の問題に人々一人一人がアプローチしていく必要があるというふうに考えるのですが、それについてどのようなお考えをお持ちかお聞かせ願えますでしょうか。
Yeah, this is a very important point that plagues never take place in a kind of vacuum. They remind us that humans are animals. We are part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And, infectious diseases actually very often result from our own actions. It's not like some force of nature that all of a sudden drops an epidemic on us. It often starts with our actions. Most of the infectious diseases we suffer from and suffered for thousands of years actually resulted from the agricultural revolution. Before agriculture, when humans were hunter-gatherers, there were very few infectious diseases and no epidemics. Why? Because, first of all, most infectious diseases came to us from domesticated animals, like chickens and cows and so forth. Hunter-gatherers had no domesticated animals. And secondly, they lived in very small mobile communities. So even if somebody was infected, he or she could maybe infect 10 other people, 100 other people, but that's it. No epidemic. The epidemics started when humans first domesticated cows and sheep and chicken and ducks. And secondly, when they moved to live in towns and cities with trade connections, and these were usually very crowded places with lots of garbage and sewage systems and no modern hygienic conditions. So this was the paradise for germs. And it was our actions which actually began the pandemics. And this is true until today. So we definitely need a bigger holistic approach to this. I think the other thing, if we think about the Black Death, is how resilient human beings are or human society is. The Black Death was a far, far greater calamity than COVID-19. It's estimated that in the first wave of the pandemic, something between a quarter and half the population, depending on the area, in Asia and Europe and North Africa died. We can't even imagine. With COVID, it's far, far less. You would imagine that society will just completely collapse. But it didn't. It continued to function. The monasteries continued to function, the Catholic Church continued to function, the kingdoms, the empires, the cities, they continued to function. And not because there was some overall headquarters that rushed around forces, no. Individual people, small communities on the ground made decisions, made efforts how to cope. And despite the terrible difficulties and losses, they succeeded. And we see it again with modern epidemics. If you think, for example, about the last big epidemic before COVID was AIDS. And still we have millions of people suffering from it. When AIDS erupted in the 1980s, initially the governments did nothing because they said, oh, AIDS, this is a problem of gay people. This is a problem of minority groups. We don't care about it, let them die. And what you saw is that these groups, abandoned by the government, left to their own resources, they did not collapse. They did not despair. They actually started grassroots organizations which helped sick people, which pressured politicians to have investments in medical research. And amazingly, the LGBT community came out of the AIDS epidemic actually much stronger than it was before. And this, we can all take inspiration from that, you know, if you wait for somebody high there to do something and they do nothing, you can still take some action on the individual level, on the community level, and this will help not only deal with the immediate medical crisis, it will have a lot of other benefits later on.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
黒死病があっても中世のヨーロッパではその社会が大きく変化することなく続いていったんだっていうのはすごく印象的で、ただ続いていったからこそ本来変えなきゃいけないことも、例えば貧困の問題とかその人口が増えている問題とか、そういうジェンダーの問題とか、そういう変えていかなきゃ問題っていうのがそのままこう置き去りにされる可能性もあるわけですよね。ですからそういったことについて、私たち一人一人が強く意識しながら取り組んでいかなければいけないんだなということを強く感じました。
先生ありがとうございます。そして拓磨先生もありがとうございました。都立大の先生お二方からですね、パンデミックが与えた社会的影響について、国際政治歴史学の観点からいろんなエキサイティングな議論を、皆様ありがとうございます。次はですね、いよいよ都立大の学生の皆さんに登場していただきたいと思います。さてここからは都立大生の皆さんにジョインしていただきます。ポストコロナの未来について、ハラリ教授と一緒に議論をいろいろと掘り下げていただきたいと思います。先生お二方の研究室から3人の学生の皆様にですねお越しいただいてますけども、ではまず、田辺さんからいきましょうか。お願いいたします。
法学部4年の田辺カレンです。ハラリさんのお話は今後の危機感の継承もありましたが、私たちの今後の行動次第ではグローバルコーポレーションが好転するという前向きなお話もいただけてよかったなと思います。貴重なお話ありがとうございました。私の質問としては、グローバルガバナンスに関することなんですが、今日の状況を見ると先進国をはじめさまざまな国でナショナリズムやポピュリズムの傾向が見えると思います。でその傾向というのは国内の自由意志を反映した結果のものと思います。そこでお伺いしたいのは、市民社会や個人のレベルの人々がグローバルガバナンスの直接的また間接的な構成員としてどのような視点を持つべきかということです。例えば私たちがワクチンを打つか打たないかという判断もありますが、私たち個人のレベルでグローバルガバナンスやグローバルコーポレーションについてどのような行動をしていけばいいかということをお聞かせいただければと思います。よろしくお願いします。
Well, the way for individuals to affect change on any level, national, international, is by joining organizations and working together. It's very difficult for an individual, for a single human being to make a difference. But if 50 individuals join an organization, they have a lot of power. It's kind of exponential. 50 people cooperating in an organization have far more power than 500 isolated individuals, each trying to do their own thing. Cooperation is the human superpower. So if there is a cause which is important to you, which is close to your heart, whether it's healthcare, whether it's climate change, anything, the best advice as an individual is join an organization. If there is no organization that kind of does what you think should be done, start an organization and cooperate with other people. Now, and again, the other thing to remember is that don't think in binary terms, in terms of contradictions of either or. Like with nationalism and populism, some people think I have to choose as an individual or as a country. I have to choose between nationalism, national loyalty, and globalism, global cooperation. But this is not the right way to think about it. There is always usually a way, I mean, the reality is complicated. We have multiple loyalties, And we can actually often find that these things help each other. They complement each other. I don't think we need to give up nationalism in order to have good global cooperation. We just need to understand nationalism better. If people think that nationalism is hating foreigners, then no, you can't base cooperation on nationalism. But nationalism is not hating foreigners, it's actually loving your compatriots and taking care of them. And for instance, in a time of a pandemic, the best way to take care of people in my country is to cooperate with people in other countries. So to be a good nationalist means to support global cooperation. Like in Israel, we got a vaccine. I got like 3 times the Pfizer vaccine. It was not developed by Israeli scientists. And it was not manufactured by Israeli companies. No, it was developed by a German company, which was established by Turkish immigrants to Germany, and then manufactured by an American multinational, Pfizer. So it would be ridiculous of Israeli nationalists to say, no, we don't want this Turkish-German vaccine. We wait to have an Israeli vaccine. It will be ridiculous. So there is no contradiction between nationalism and globalism. And if we are able to go beyond this kind of oversimplified binary thinking, it can help solve a lot of problems, not just the pandemic.
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
田辺さん、教授のお言葉いかがでしたか？
両立できるということをすごく納得しました。私も含めさまざまな人がその考え方を持つことがすごく大事だなと思います。
Excellent. Thank you to both of you. Let's go to our next student then. 続いての学生の方ですね。大塚さん、お願いできますでしょうか。
はい、近世ハンガリーの宗教改革について研究している大塚です。先生方のお話では、コロナの解決には国際的な協力が必要であるということが非常に印象的でした。そして、政治を動かすためには私たちの意識も変わっていく必要があると思います。そこでポストコロナの異文化交流について質問させていただきたいと思います。僕が注目している東欧地域では、近世の宗教改革期に高度な宗教関与法令が諸地域に率先して制定されてきたという歴史があります。そしてその背景としては、そうした地域では古くから複数の民族が共存してきたという下地があったことや、西洋で起きた宗教紛争の衝撃を間近に見てそれを反面教師にすることができたという異文化の近さが非常に大きいと私は考えています。一方で日本は現在も日本人が大多数を占める島国でして、過去には2世紀にわたって鎖国を行っていた歴史もあります。そして今日パンデミックによって外国人の姿は再び大きく減りました。日本のように単一民族が大多数を占め、異文化があまり身近でない地域において、異文化に対する理解やグローバルな意識を醸成していくために必要となっていく視点として、ハラリ先生はどのようなものをお考えでしょうか。お尋ねしたいです。
Well, I mean, first of all, to just realize how important foreigners and foreign ideas are for each and every one of us. We probably owe our life to foreigners. Even if we live in a country with very few immigrants, it's still true that not only our life was probably saved, not once, but many times, by medicines invented by somebody on the other side of the world, and we eat food and we wear clothes that people manufactured in other countries. But even what we take to be our cherished cultural traditions, if you look close enough, you realize, hey, this is actually came from foreigners. Whether it's religious traditions like Buddhism or like Christianity, whether it's fashions, it's writing systems, if you look back enough and close enough in history, you realize that there is no such thing as a pure culture in terms of it was only created here by our people. We didn't take anything from other people. It can be sports, whether it's baseball or football, that was invented by other people and we adopted it. If you really try to kind of say, let's get rid of all the foreign influences, you would very soon realize that you get rid of almost all your life. What you love to do, what you love to eat, your most intimate thoughts, they too often came from foreigners. So I think it's a good exercise for any person in any country to really, like make a list of the things that define you, of the things that make your life worth living, and then investigate where did things really come from. So some things certainly you will find, yes, they came from here. But you would be surprised how many things actually came from foreigners.
大塚さん、いかがでしょうか。
はい、私たち自身の中にあるその多民族性とか、そういったものに気づいていくことが非常に大事だと思いました。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。Before we go on to our next question, Professor Harari, you talked of this list that we should be making for ourselves. Did you ever have the opportunity to do that for yourself?
Oh yeah, I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
And almost everything I cherish and value in life, it came from some of it came from somewhere else, from other people. Whether it's the food that I eat. So I don't know. I like tomatoes, and tomatoes didn't come from Israel. Didn't come from the Middle East. They were domesticated in Central America by Indians. And I meditate 2 hours every day. This is not Jewish meditation, it's a Buddhist meditation that came from Southeast Asia. And I don't know, I like, when I was a kid, not an Eli, I like to play football. So football wasn't invented by Jews, football was invented by English.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So, I mean, even what people take to be kind of Jewish religion, if you really look into it, you find that many of the ideas and traditions that are central to Judaism, they actually came from the Egyptians, from the Babylonians. The letters that people write the scriptures, the Bible with, they are not Hebrew letters. They are actually the script of the Assyrian Empire, which was adopted by the Jews when they lived under the Assyrian Empire. So like this, as I said, if you examine almost anything, you realize at a certain point, it was actually influenced, or it came from foreigners.
Excellent. 皆さんもね、もしお時間あったらそのリストをご自身で作っていただいて、いろいろとね、いろいろと自問自答するきっかけになるかもしれません。大塚さん、ありがとうございます。では最後にですね、諸岡さん、お願いできますでしょうか。
はい、都立大学の諸岡陸です。先ほどからグローバルな連携が重要であるというようなお話から、コロナ禍における指導者の役割についてお聞きしたいなというふうに思います。私は13世紀のスペインを対象に、キリスト教国家におけるキリスト教国家の宮廷におけるユダヤ人というのを研究テーマにしております。そこではキリスト教徒とユダヤ教徒、時にはムスリムといった人々が天文表の作成だったり翻訳活動といった文化事業に協力して取り組んでいる姿が見られます。こうした異なる3つの宗教の人々が協力することができた理由の一つに、文化事業を推し進めた国王という指導者の存在が大きな要因だったのではないかというふうに考えております。そしてこの新型コロナウイルス流行に伴う国際的な課題解決の場において多国的な協力を行う際にもこうした議論というのを主導していく存在が必要だというふうに思っております。ハラリさんも国際協力というものの重要性を説いておりますし、先ほどもグローバルヘルスコーポレーションといったものの重要性というものについてもお話しされていたようにお話しされていたと思います。世界を見ると少し前まではアメリカがその世界を引っ張っていく指導的役割っていうのを担ってくれていたかと思うんですけれども、近年ではアメリカがそういった立場から退いてしまった今、それを引き継ぐ国もしくは組織っていったものに求められる 要素であったり素質っていったものにはどういったものがあるのかなっていうところについてハラリさんのご意見をお伺いしたいなと思います。
Yeah, there is always need of leadership on such things. And it's true that the US have served as a kind of global leader for several generations, but it basically abdicated this position, this job, in the last few years. And we see it in the COVID pandemic that there was no leadership. We can hope that maybe the US will take this position again, but it's very uncertain. If if every 4 years humanity has to wait and see who the Americans elect this time, it's not a very stable situation. So ideally, other countries should step in to fill the vacuum, to fill the void, and maybe have more of a collective leadership, which will be better because it will represent a greater variety of interests and points of view. Many countries kind of play this game of blaming the Americans. Hey, you did this and you didn't do that. And that's, it's easy to blame others. The difficult thing is to step up yourself and say, okay, I'm not happy with what they are doing. We and maybe several other nations together will try to provide this kind of global leadership, whether it's on fighting COVID, whether it's on dealing with climate change, whether it's on regulating technologies like artificial intelligence, which again is a global problem. And whether it will actually be done or not, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that I'm a scholar, I'm a scientist, I'm not a politician. And there is a huge difference between the two. Many people also are in the tendency of kind of ridiculing or blaming politicians. But there are good politicians. There are bad politicians, of course, but there are some good politicians out there. It's a very difficult job. So it demands a lot of responsibility. And it's there. Nobody can really replace them. Sometimes when people despair of politicians, they try to look elsewhere for leadership. Okay, maybe the scientists will lead the world. Maybe the celebrities, the film stars, the rock stars will lead. It won't work. As a scientist, I tell you, we can't do it. You need very special skills to be a politician. Mainly, you need to be able to make compromises and strike deals and build coalitions. It's a very special skills. I don't have them. I can't do it. Rock stars also, they can't do it. So we just need better politicians.
諸岡さん、いかがでしたか？
はい、ありがとうございます。先ほど、単一の国家ではなくて、いろんな国家が集まってリーダーシップを発揮していくっていうのはその通りだなと思って、やっぱりそれぞれの国が自分の得意分野なり他国の足りてないところを補っていくっていう姿勢っていうところを考えていきたいなっていうふうに思います。ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Professor Harari, has no one ever told you you should be a politician?
Many people told me, and they just don't know me. I mean, I would be a terrible politician. Again, I'm not saying it out of false modesty or anything. As a historian, I know what it takes to be a good politician, and I just don't have it. It's a special set of skills that, above all, you need this ability to build coalitions, wide, broad coalitions, to take into account the interests of different groups and balance them, to inspire different groups. And it's a very different thing than what scientists do that say they pursue the truth. In politics, the truth is not always your best friend. If you just go around telling the truth to everybody, you will annoy a lot of people. Your coalition will break up very quickly. So you need to know to have this balance. Again, some people take it to extreme, and you have these politicians that just lie in order to gain power, and this is terrible. But the other extreme of just, I'll just say the truth no matter what to anybody in their face, and hope they will come around, it also doesn't work very well. So we need this group of people that, they train for many years. You don't start by being president or prime minister. You start on a municipal level or whatever, and you slowly climb up. And it's a respectable and very difficult job. Hopefully, I think that young people sometimes, they say, oh, all the politicians are terrible. I don't want to be a politician. And that's bad, because then we'll have only bad politicians if all the good people stay out of politics. So, yeah, it's a difficult job. It's sometimes thankless. It has a lot of temptations that you need to kind of resist. But we also have some very good and inspiring examples from history for politicians who did a lot of good. And I hope in the new generations, people who have the right abilities and inclinations will not be afraid, will not shy away from joining this line of action.
Thank you. ハラリ教授の政治家の定義って実に興味深いですよね。さあ、それではですね、あっという間ですけれども終わりの時間が近づいてまいりました。Professor Harari, it's been a great honor to have time with you. I'm speaking on behalf of absolutely everyone. Last but not least, in some of your recent interviews, if we play our cards correctly, you've stated that Omicron could be the last, or COVID-19 could be the last pandemic. I well and truly hope so. I wanted to ask you, Professor Harari, about how you envisage the world in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, after we've put COVID-19 to dust into past history.
It depends on us. There isn't a single future, deterministic future that you can just foresee. It depends on what we decide. If we react to COVID and to other crises like climate change by accusing other people, by disunity, by developing greed, how do I make as much money as possible from this opportunity, by spreading disinformation and conspiracy theories, the world will be a terrible place in 10 years. If, on the other hand, we react with generosity, with cooperation, by trusting science, even when it gives us unwelcome news, then the world could be a wonderful place in a very short time, 10 or 20 years, because humanity has enormous resources. We are currently kind of misusing our resources. We invest a lot of time and energy and money in the wrong places. But we are immensely powerful. And if we get our priorities right, and again, if we develop wisdom and compassion and not greed and hatred, then we can create a wonderful world for everybody.
Excellent. And in order for that to become a reality, that would be up to the politicians. This is what you have said today, right?
Not only the politicians, again, they are in the leadership role, but as I emphasized, everybody can make a change. Again, as an individual, it's very difficult to make a change just by yourself. But once you join a couple of other individuals, that's the human superpower. Even a very small organization, just 50 people, 100 people, can make immense change, far more than, thousands of people working individually in isolation. Because even 50 people, when they work together, they complement each other's abilities. They have different abilities that can combine. They support each other in times of difficulty, in time of need. And this is the greatest power on earth is not the technology we produce. It's not our tools. It's our ability to organize effectively. If you solve that, everything else becomes much easier.
Excellent. And with those words, we also get the point about global cooperation. Last but not least, Professor Harari, can we have a few words from you to the youths out there who need a sense, a clue about how their futures should unravel? If you could give like a word of encouragement and what they should be doing that would be a lovely tone in which we could say goodbye.
Yeah, I think we should get to know ourselves better. You know, we now have all these AI systems and big data systems constantly collecting data on us, and all these corporations and governments trying to get to know us better and better, sometimes in order to manipulate and control us. If we want to keep control of our life, to keep agency, then we need to get to know ourselves better, because the way they manipulate us is by using our own weaknesses against us. Like if we already have, say, a fear of foreigners, this is what makes it easy to manipulate us with all kinds of fake news and conspiracy theories and so forth. If you get to know yourself better, it protects you from these kinds of manipulations. And also, the greatest mystery in the universe is still the human mind. We know very, very little about it. If you think, how am I going to survive in the 21st century with all this AI and robots and whatever? So some people think, well, we need to kind of upgrade humans. We need to grow 2 more hands. We need to double the size of our brains. No. We know very little about the true potential of the human mind. If you could understand your mind better, and if you could utilize the full potential of the mind you already have, that's going to be enough, at least for the next few decades, to deal with the immense changes around. You know, it's like we are trying to run to the supermarket to buy stuff instead of looking in the refrigerator to see what we've already got. So before people dream about using all kinds of technologies to augment humanity, first of all, see what we've already got. Because we know, as individuals and also as a collective, we know surprisingly little about our true abilities.
Professor Harari, thank you so much for your kind words. It's been a fantastic occasion to be able to talk to you in person, but in the collective, with all of us and together. Stay safe and take care. And hopefully one day it will be great to see you in person too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great to meet you also.
Cheers. Thank you.